Good evening. The controversy over the arrest of a suspected separatist operative Liyaqat Shah has prompted the Home Ministry to hand over the case to the National Investigation Agency. The differences of opinion between the centre and the state government has resulted in the PMO deciding to relook into the Jammu and Kashmir rehabilitation policy for surrendered militants. The Prime Minister's office hopes that the exercise can result in a larger and more comprehensive national policy on rehabilitation of former militants in the country. This policy would cover armed separatists not only in Jammu and Kashmir, but also those in the northeast as well as Maoist cadres. As far as the Liyaqat Ali case is concerned, the controversy rages on as the special cell of the Delhi police that apprehended him claims that he was allegedly planning to carry out terror strikes in the national capital during Holi this week. The Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister, in a loud and clear statement, endorsed the J&K police's contention over the arrest and said in the now famous quote that suicide bombers do not infiltrate borders with their families in tow. The Kashmir police, according to their version, had even sent out couriers to Sanauli in Gorakhpur to arrange for Liyaqat Ali Shah's safe return. Shah, they claim, was coming back to Kashmir under the state government's rehabilitation policy for surrendered militants and has been in existence since 2010. Some officials have also privately expressed concern that Shah's arrest will now be used openly by the ISI and terror groups. In a country where civilian and armed conflicts are a grim reality. Joining me tonight will be Radha Kumar, Centre's Interlocutor for Kashmir and noted author, Arun Bhagat, former chief of the IB and CBI, Poornima Joshi, senior journalist. On the phone line from Srinagar will be Shamim, Meraj, editor of the English daily Kashmir Monitor. Welcome all to the big picture. I'd like to start with you, Mr. Bhagat, if I could. Your first reactions to the Liyaqat case, and presuming that you know as much as we do from the Delhi police version as well as the following media coverage as well. But looking at what we know now, Mr. Bhagat, do you think it could have been handled slightly better, slightly differently, and that there was a distinct lack of coordination between all the security agencies at play here?
Well, certainly, as far as coordination is concerned, I think there can be improvement all the time. As far as handling is concerned, yes, perhaps the Delhi police statements were a little early. I won't say they were premature because this has become a regular pattern with all the police forces in the country, that as soon as they have something, they divulge it to the press. Now, I do not know whether it is the pressure of the press or the need to give publicity to themselves, but this has become the pattern over the past years. Now, coming back to the Liyaqat case, here is some information which they have received. It is not clear where it came from, and it will not be made clear if it has been gathered by the intelligence agencies, which the Delhi police had. They sent a team to Gorakhpur.
Right.
Now, if there's no question as far as frame-up is concerned. I think it is totally wrong to say that he has been framed. Now, why should Liyaqat, of all the hundreds of crores which of people living in India, should be selected by the Delhi police for a frame-up, and they send a party to Gorakhpur? Yes, misinformation, wrong information can come in.
Right.
As far as investigation is concerned, the Delhi police or any other police in the country or any security agency is bound to verify an information which has been received.
Right. So they could have handled it differently. They could have handled it differently. I want to get a quick reaction from Radha Kumar, who's also with us, also Centre's Interlocutor for Kashmir, and since Liyaqat is a Kashmiri. Welcome to the show, Radha Kumar. First of all, I want to get your reaction on the whole episode. Do you think, like Mr. Bhagat said, there could have been better coordination? And do you also think that Delhi police, the special cell, jumped the gun? Right, we seem to have lost the audio from Radha Kumar. We'll try and get back to her in just a moment. I want to come to my guest in the studio, Poornima Joshi, right now. Poornima, you heard what Mr. Bhagat had to say. We'll get Radha Kumar's reaction on it as well. But your first reaction to the whole episode, do you think that the Delhi police, the special cell, and like Mr. Bhagat said, they've done this in the past, did they jump the gun?
You know, Delhi Police Special Cell has been known for its ham-handed approach for a long time. They did this in Butler House. They have done it in the past, and they have done it again. Liyaqat's case, I at least, from the facts that are reported in the newspapers, I at least have no doubt in my mind that they have messed it up very royally. Now, that is so insofar as the Delhi Police Special Cell are concerned. Now, if you look at the rehabilitation policy that you're talking about, now that is a very curious, initiative. And I want to first understand what they mean by rehabilitation, because here we are talking about radicalized, ideologically radicalized, religiously radicalized human beings. So where has this worked? Has any work gone into what the international experience has been in this regard? Because other countries have experimented with rehabilitation processes. And so are we trying to achieve in some way some sort of desistance from political violence, or we are trying to turn them into pacifists? By what means? Are we trying to sort of educate them, give them jobs, or give them money as West Bengal? I mean, some of the states have this these sort of policies.
It's an interesting point that you raise, Poornima. I want to come back to that and what really a nationwide policy could be. I want to get Shamim, Meraj into the picture right now. Shamim, many thanks for joining us from Srinagar. Before I come to the national rehab policy that we seem to be talking about and the need for a better, more comprehensive policy on that, Shamim, staying on the Liyaqat case for just a bit, since he's a Kashmiri former militant, what is your take on the whole situation? Now, I know the Honorable Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir doesn't always get it right, but in this case, do you agree with the statement he made in the J&K Assembly?
Well, Athar, first of all, I would agree with Poornima that Kashmir has no love lost for Delhi Police Special Cell. And, on that particular day when they actually arrested Liyaqat, all it would have taken for them was to make a phone call to their counterparts in Srinagar and try and find out whether Liyaqat was on the list of approved former militants who were coming from different routes back into the valley. That is the sense there. Also, the sense in the valley is that Liyaqat, when 20 years ago he had gone to POK or Muzaffarabad in the prime of his youth, if he did not come back at that time to fight in Kashmir, you think at the age of 50 he would come back from Nepal along with his impaired daughter and wife, and then try and plan a Fidayeen attack. So there is a bit of, a lot of bizarre twists to these stories. And of course, there is the Jammu and Kashmir police that has taken the Delhi police head on that. So clearly, there are a lot of missing links into the story, and certainly the onus will be on the Delhi police to prove that they are right, since they have already shown a recovery of weapons from Liyaqat's aid. Also, the fact that there was another militant traveling with Liyaqat, he has managed to reach to his hometown in North Kashmir. He is there currently in the custody of J&K police. So this story, I don't think will end very soon. It will continue to unfold. But again, it is a botch up by various security agencies. And at the end of the day, the entire rehab policy has come into a stress. And already we are hearing a lot of guys who were planning to come back to the valley from Nepal. They have put their plans on hold.
Right, Shamim, very interesting information that the other militant or former militant, surrendered militant who was traveling with Mr. Liyaqat has reached his hometown safe. Why wasn't he really stopped? I want to get Mr. Arun Bhagat's reaction to this. Mr. Bhagat, the public laundering of the dispute now over this Liyaqat, his actual status, and like Shamim right now mentioned that he was on the list of those 350 people who were supposed to come back through Nepal. Intentions... it seems to have spurred the PMO into perhaps into a relook of the whole rehab policy, not just for J&K but also for the country, and also stressed the need for a comprehensive nationwide policy for surrendered separatists. How dire really is the need for such a policy, Mr. Bhagat?
Well, obviously, because the problem is existing virtually in all areas of the country, whether it is the north, it is the northeast and central India. So I think that a policy which is thought out well, which is discussed by all the states, keeping of course the regional nuances in mind and the peculiarities of the particular state. But at the same time, what it should be forward-looking. Yes, that is very necessary, and it should include all sorts of possible contingencies. Now, it is going to be a long process. There's no doubt about it. As one of the panelists mentioned, that they are religiously and ideologically totally motivated.
Brainwashed, in fact, yes.
Oh yes, brainwashed, which is even worse. So that, I think, has to be thought out, because the consequences will also have to be considered, and the security the establishment has to be consulted about it, because they have dealings with them all the time, they have contacts with them all the time, and they would also be able to give very good inputs as regards
Right.
framing this policy.
Right. I want to come back to Poornima right now. Given the fact, Poornima, that India has a lot of, let's call them internal disputes, present right now in the various parts of the country, northeast, like Mr. Bhagat mentioned, north of the country, there's a Maoist, if you want to call it a problem as well. Don't you think a policy like this, a comprehensive policy where, I know you asked the question that what are we really trying to do with these people, but a policy nonetheless for the whole of the country, shouldn't that policy been thought of, put on paper and implemented years ago? Did we falter on that front?
Yeah, well, some states already have a policy, like West Bengal is trying to give them money. Now, there is no, internationally, if you look at the experiments of Colombia, Indonesia, there is no ready blueprint for this sort of venture. People try their own experiments, and these things evolve through intuitively, and people test the grounds, and then different regions have different demands. Now, but if you are going into rehabilitation of an individual, then the dealings with your Maoists would have to be entirely different from the experiences in Kashmir, which has also been trying these amnesty schemes, etc. But Maoists, already the center is following a two-pronged sort of a strategy where they are propping up development in those insurgent areas. Also sort of trying security handling of those people.
Right.
Now, as I said before, you are dealing with highly ideologically motivated human beings who have, whether we like it or not, there is a certain socio-political context in which they exist, in which their feelings of alienation, etc., are harbored or may be exploited by their mentors. But here you have a guerrilla army which is fighting the center. Now, how do you win them over to your side? Now, what is your perception of how they should be, as you say, rehabilitated? Right. Because from their point of view, they are fighting a political cause.
Do you think the government should invite more consultations with, say, civil society and other groups as well to come forward and give suggestions?
Definitely, definitely. This process will have to be thought more deeply. That's what I'm saying, that internationally there is no ready blueprint available for you.
In business terms, there are no international best practices. There
are no best practices here. You
right.
will have to evolve this process.
Absolutely.
So you'll have to invite stakeholders. You need to discuss these
Right. On that note,
things.
we'll take a small break. Lots more to discuss on the big picture. We'll come back right after the break. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the big picture. We are discussing the PMO's proposal that a whole national rehabilitation policy for surrendered militants and former separatists be relooked at and perhaps come up with a comprehensive, more singular, nationwide policy. Such a policy, of course, has its pros and cons. Shamim Meraj, editor of the Kashmir Monitor, is still with us on the phone line. Shamim, my question to you is pretty direct. There are concerns, and senior officials in the Home Ministry have also expressed them privately, as far as I know, and this incident could be used by the ISI and other non-state actors across the border in Pakistan to ignite more anti-India sentiments. What is the pulse in Srinagar, especially coming right on the heels on the Afzal Guru death sentence? What is the feeling on ground zero there?
Well, Athar, the feeling in the ground, and everyone, including me, is praying that the center does not consider holding on to this policy for some time and planning a new one, because as we all know, UPA is in a policy paralysis, and I don't think at this point of time, a year before the elections, they can come out with a newly reworked rehabilitation policy for former militants. That's besides the point. This, as far as Kashmir was concerned, this policy has been working very well, though very quietly. Large number of people have come from different points, apart from the ones stated officially in the policy, like the LOC, because you have to understand, Pakistan, for a huge majority of people, they don't claim they even exist on the soil. So obviously, with the tacit understanding of the center, of the Home Ministry, the government of Jammu and Kashmir was bringing in people from roots from Nepal. As far as Kashmir is concerned, if you go for a review, then all such points, they come to a standstill, and no new people who want to come back need to go ahead with their plan. So let's hope that center at this point of time does not go for a policy review, and let things flow as they already are, and let there be more coordination between various security agencies. And instead of going to the press, it would be better if they first talk amongst themselves as to who is a legitimate surrender, or who is just trying to barge in through a border.
Right, Shamim. I want to go to Mr. Bhagat right now. Mr. Bhagat, a successful rehabilitation policy, which includes a successful surrender and return to the mainstream, so-called, could be a huge political, not to mention a diplomatic victory for India, especially when we look at the funders of the violence, in this case Pakistan, unwilling to be part of the process. Your thoughts on that?
Well, particularly in this case of Liyaqat and other cases, I would say that some sort of an assessment needs to be made by the Jammu and Kashmir government that since 2010, what has been done and what is the net positive effect of it within the society. I think this is very necessary, because continuing with the program or with the policy without making an assessment of its success. Now, for example, how many militants who had given up, who had come overboard and have been rehabilitated or have been given whatever assistance which the state government has planned, have reverted back or have been conspiring against the state of Jammu and Kashmir in helping their ex-comrades.
Right.
Now, these are issues which have to be. So here we must also realize that even if a person's name is on that list and he is coming forward to surrender, even the Jammu and Kashmir police would vet it to see that how genuine is this man's claim. After all, as far as the tanzeems are concerned and all these militant organizations are concerned, we know how good they are in duplicity.
Absolutely.
So why do we have to presume that this man, just because he says he is willing to surrender, is genuine?
The vetting process has to be more comprehensive. I take your points. Radha Kumar, Interlocutor, Centre's Interlocutor to Kashmir, has joined us on the phone line now. We seem to have lost the connection earlier, but she is on the phone line right now. Welcome to the big picture, Radha Kumar. I want to get your opinion first up on the whole case, the Liyaqat Ali case, and also if you could tell us your views on the PMO's proposal that a comprehensive, nationwide, singular, uniform policy for surrendered separatists and former militants, which could include and will include militants from the northeast as well as Maoist cadres. What is your opinion on that? First up, your views on the Liyaqat Ali case. Could it have been handled better?
Yeah, there's no doubt it could have been handled better, and even as of now, we have very mixed and patchy information on what actually happened. But what is very clear is that there was no communication earlier on the fact that there were some surrendered militants returning, which would have been a useful thing for every police station to have had. So there's no doubt that there's rather a bad mess on that score.
Right.
On the other questions, First of all, India has a great deal of experience on surrendered militants, both from the states of the northeast of India and indeed in Jammu and Kashmir. Militants have been surrendering since the early 1990s. There were militants who surrendered who were within Jammu and Kashmir, and there were militants who surrendered who had gone across the LOC. So I think that history can certainly be examined. When we were interlocutors, we did have some complaints from people who had surrendered that at one point they were given a small monthly amount of money, and then that had been turned off, and then no other provisions had been made, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So there are problems with the way the policy is implemented. A second point is that, by the way, it should be noted that India has had considerable success in involving surrendered militants in the political process.
Right.
They have not had so much success in reintegrating the entire range of them into productive life.
Right. Dr. Kumar, if I could interject right now for 1 second.
I just wanted to make one other point,
Sure,
which
go
is
ahead.
that it is completely incorrect to say there are no international blueprints. Number one, India itself has so much experience on this, and indeed has a strategy that the army has been following, for example, for a very long time, 30, 40 years.
Right, right.
Secondly, internationally, there are many, many very good blueprints on how to first of all get surrenders and how secondly to reintegrate.
I take your point, Dr. Kumar.
And they have very similar features.
I take your point, Dr. Kumar. I have one follow-up, a very brief query for you. And this is the counterpoint here. There were, like you said, experiments in the past about, with surrendered militants. In this particular case, in Jammu Kashmir's case, there were surrendered militants in the mid-90s who gave up arms, but then resurfaced as government-backed militants. They used to call them Ikwanis, and they turned into big money extorters. It blew up in everybody's face. Do you not think that particular instance could, happen again?
Look, first of all, I think this is a question that would be best addressed to those who ran the counterinsurgency policy at that time.
I'm just asking for your views on it.
My views are that certainly it became a very ugly aspect of counterinsurgency, and indeed that is why around, I think, 2003-04 to about 6-7, that program was closed down.
Right, right.
And that was a very good news story. In any case, I mean, Jammu and Kashmir, let us not have a sort of seamless, timeless view. The situation has changed. There is very little militancy, even though, unfortunately, we have seen a slight rising curve in the last couple of months.
Right, right.
Still, it is much, much less, and it is on the verge. It's been ready for peace building.
Dr. Kumar, I want to get Poornima Joshi in now. I want to get Poornima Joshi in. Dr. Kumar slightly disagreed with it. She said international best practices are available. India has done it before. Your response?
Yeah, well, international best practices are available with very, very similar features. They involve educational, vocational training, etc. Or what shall I say, de-radicalization of people, some sort of the religious training is involved, etc. What I'm saying is that different situations have different requirements. So one blueprint doesn't suit all. So India has had considerable success, but if you look at situations like Sulfa, or the Ikwanis that you were talking about, we, I mean, pardon me for saying this, but Afzal Guru has also been known as a surrendered militant. So what I'm saying is that different situations, Maoists, Kashmiris, they involved very, very different circumstances and different handling. So a national policy will have to consider those regional aspects and situational aspects
I
in
do
mind.
agree with Poornima Joshi here. I want to put the same question, the point that Poornima raised right now to Mr. Arun Bhagat, a nationwide comprehensive singular uniform, like I mentioned, policy for surrender and rehabilitation of separatist and anti-state actors. Is that going to be effective at all, Mr. Bhagat? My concern here is the same concern Poornima Joshi has, that different conflicts within the Indian state, that the Indian state is currently embroiled in, all have varied political realities and backgrounds. It can't be one size fits all, surely.
But the broad parameters can be there. As I had mentioned in the first place, that the regional nuances and characteristics and peculiarities will have to be borne in mind. I mean, that you definitely cannot agree. Therefore, it has to be a long period of discussion and consultation from the states. They must come up with some ideas, and these ideas can be vetted, they can be examined for commonality, and maybe for a certain area you will have a absolutely unique sort of a set of arrangements.
Right, right.
But yes, but what is more necessary is regular assessment, because this policy should not be rigid. It has to have the flexibility to keep on being, let us say, changed or trimmed. The sails need to be trimmed and a different tack taken at some point of time.
It can be firm, but it has to be flexible. I have about 1 minute left on the show. I want to get Radha Kumar's opinions on this since he joined us a little late. Dr. Kumar, now, a singular policy, nationwide, one size fits all, cannot be possible. Mr. Bhagat says it has to be flexible but firm. What do you think the initiative by the PMO, a relook at not just the Jammu and Kashmir rehabilitation policy, but a rehabilitation policy for surrendered and separatists and militants all over the country, does civil society need to get involved far more actively?
First of all, I think there's a confusion over here. The political process whereby you get militants to surrender may be different according to different circumstances and situations. But very frankly, rehabilitation will almost always entail the same things: productive jobs, resettlement in society, becoming a constructive and productive part of society. This is not, and by the way, I don't think that this is a question of re-ideological education. This is the person who surrenders has already given up what they did before. That's the purpose of the surrender, so to speak. And you might then wish to have criteria whereby you look at it. For example, people who may have committed many hundreds of murders may not be acceptable as surrender. You may say that you want justice in certain cases.
Right, right.
And rehabilitation, amnesty. Surrender involves amnesty, number one. Pardon.
Ma'am, briefly, ma'am.
And then constructive engagement. And a job at the end of the day is a job, no matter where it is. It can be in a Naxalite area, or it can be in Jammu Kashmir, or it can be in Chhattisgarh, wherever.
Right, Dr. Kumar.
But it's the same thing.
Absolutely,
and
point taken.
I absolutely agree that it is important to have a nationwide debate.
Right.
And decision on that.
Right, Dr. Kumar.
Each state may implement differently.
Dr. Kumar, unfortunately, we run out of time today on The Big Picture. I must thank all my guests who joined me for the show today. Shamim, Meraj, many thanks for joining us on the phone line from Srinagar. Arun, Bhagat, Dr. Radha, Kumar and Poornima, Joshi in the studio. That's all the time we have on The Big Picture. Of course, one particular point that came out, that more consultation is needed for a national rehabilitation policy for surrendered and former militants. I think more consultation with civil society also is needed, and civil society needs to come forward with those recommendations. That's all the time we have. Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching.